Hello, everyone, and welcome to Kentucky Small Business Development Center's weekly Wednesday webinar. I'm Dave Etkin. I'm the director here of the SBDC Center in Louisville, Kentucky. So if it's your first time joining me, welcome. Or if it's your 100th time joining me, thank you again for joining again. Always glad to see you. As I see a lot of you guys just starting to come in and get settled, I'll give everybody a minute to join. But before we get started today, I'd like to take a few minutes to share some information about the Kentucky Small Business Development Center program. As the only statewide nationally accredited program that provides entrepreneurial and business development services, the Kentucky SBDC plays a vital role in Kentucky's economic development by assisting entrepreneurs at every stage of their business life cycle. For almost 40 years, the Kentucky SBDC has assisted emerging and growing businesses by providing professional expertise, tools, and information necessary to make sound business decisions in a complex and ever-changing marketplace. We do this at no cost to our clients, thanks to the U.S. Small Business Development Administration, who co-sponsors our program, which is then administered by the University of Kentucky, who partners with regional universities, colleges, and local economic development agencies. We're also part of a national network, America's SBDC, with over 1,000 centers across the nation. To learn more, visit KentuckySBDC.com. There you'll find additional resources to help start, fund, and grow your business. And to request personal assistance, email us at info@KentuckySBDC.com or just give us a call at 1-888-475-7232. And if you look to the right of your screen, you'll find the chat feature. If you have any questions for our presenter, you can post them here and we'll answer them at the end of the presentation. And just to test that everything's working and you can hear me loud and clear, do me a favor, say hello and tell me where you're joining us from. Hello, Craig. Good to see you. Linda, Christy's showing up. Good to see you, Christy. Yeah, there's a lot of you guys kind of joining today. Again, I'm Dave Etkin. I'm the director here in Louisville, one of 13 centers throughout the Commonwealth of Kentucky. And just so you know, I'll send you a recording of today's webinar later on this afternoon. Today, we have a super special guest, and I'm so happy to have him today. To talk about CEO Tools. And CEO Tools is a complete business system designed to assist CEOs achieve world-class profitability and growth by basically focusing on three key areas: clear communication, consistent execution, and performance optimization. Back in 2002, successful CEO Craig Kramer's published CEO Tools, the nuts and bolts business book for every manager's success. And the book soon became kind of a go-to manual for CEOs around the country. And it's a book that I've personally bought numerous times after sharing with people that I thought needed it. And I've read it numerous times. And I was lucky enough to have met Craig Kramer several times. And he was always super kind with me and shared a lot of really good advice for me and my businesses. But Craig passed away, unfortunately, in 2014. And Jim Canfield took up CEO Tools, and he's published CEO Tools 2.0, which is a fabulous read. And it's full of great stories and a lot of tools that you can just use right away. And Jim's a great thought leader. He's a great strategist and a sought-after executive coach. And I'm really honored to have Jim join us today. Hello, Jim.
Hey, Dave. It's a pleasure to be with you. Thanks for having me.
Good. Well, what can you tell us about CEO Tools? Let's just dive right in. Like I told you earlier, I'm just super excited about the whole thing. So let's just go.
Yeah, great. Let me jump in and I'll share some things with you here. Let's see if we can't bring up a different way to look at content today. All right. Well, so I started my first business I was 20 years old. My brother was 24. We started a trucking company. We started that day with one truck. And our big goal that day was to get that one truck outloaded and the next day get it backloaded. And it worked. And then we had that feeling of, oh my gosh, we've got to do that for the rest of our lives times the number of trucks. Business grew fast. Within 3 years, we had 150 trucks, 250 employees, 17 terminal locations around the American Southeast. We grew that company to 10 million and sold it in about year 5. I went on to found another company in the investment banking world. We were an institutional investment firm and we worked with credit unions. Ended up building the largest firm working with credit unions off Wall Street in my hometown of Memphis, Tennessee. We sold that company to First Union Bank. And at that point, I started to coach other CEOs, both individually and in groups. I went on to be an executive in a company called Vistage, where I taught 750 other people how to lead groups of CEOs and coach them to the highest possible levels of performance. In my quest to help companies and CEOs, I was constantly confronting the question, what is it that has some companies grow and continue to grow while others get stuck? See, some would hit ceilings, others hit constraints, others shrank. I started to study these companies. Listen to these statistics as you think about growing your company. There are 15 million companies in the United States and North America and Canada. 15 million companies. That means 15 million people woke up with the same kind of thoughts we had this morning. How do I build, run, lead, manage, grow, maybe even save this company? There were certainly mornings my brother and I looked at each other and said, how can we pull this out of the fire one more time? Just please give us one more shot. And I am certain, since the events we've all confronted about this time last year, there are more than a few companies who woke up this morning just trying to figure out how to stay in the game. Listen to this. Out of those 15 million companies, 1 in 10, 1.5 million, will ever make it above 1 million in sales and 10 employees. 1 in 10. 1 in 100 will make it above 10 million in sales and about 25 employees. And 1 in 1,000 will make it above 100 million. Look at the odds that are against us as business leaders building our companies. What I like to do in our short time together is share as many tools, tips, techniques as I can on how I've learned to build businesses, lead companies, and what I've learned from dozens of other successful CEOs as they've done the same. Dave alluded to this. There are 3 fundamental principles that I believe every CEO must master. The first is effectively communicate. How do we get our message across to the people who work with and for us in a way that can keep them engaged to help us accomplish what we want? Execute. How do we take those plans and turn them into action that deliver the results we're looking for? And then optimize. For me, optimization is how do we keep it going? Look, if you're like me as a CEO, you're great at starting things. But how do we keep it going so that we finish strong to deliver those final goals and objectives we've laid out? And then that brings us back to communicate. How do we reset the message, execute again, and ongoing deliver those great results? Let me share a few ideas with you about how I've done it and how I've seen others do it. Let's start with communication. Every person in your organization wants to know the answer to 3 questions. Where are we going? How am I doing? And what can I do to help make things better around here? That where are we going? I'm going to focus on a couple of tools to do that. I'm going to talk about how we give people ongoing feedback about their contribution to the business. But that last one I want to touch on for 1 second. That question, how can I help make things better around here? Boy, I wish I could tell you they ask it that way, but they rarely do. It comes in the form of suggestions, ideas, maybe even complaints, sometimes even criticism. And I would tell you, we've got to be open to these ideas and this criticism. I think it's one of the biggest things that I see CEOs do is shut down and stop listening. Let's talk about this first question, where are we headed? Inside of where are we headed, there are 3 fundamental questions that have to be answered and statements that have to be made. In fact, if you don't get anything else from me this morning, get this. The one message that every leader must deliver throughout the year is, this is where we're going, this is how we're going to get there, and this is what we're tracking on an ongoing and regular basis to see if we're on track or off track. And that same message, if we can get that message across over and over, we can get people to align behind us to deliver the results we're looking for. Where are we headed? How are we going to get there? And what are we tracking to know when we're on and off track? The fundamental message that I see in every successful company that I work with is an ongoing cadence of communication, a way of delivering that message of where are we headed, how we're going to get there, and what we're tracking. on a regular basis so that people know when, where, and how the information they need to understand how the company's doing at any given moment. We're going to set that big picture, that where we're headed, how we're going to get there. Every quarter, we're going to come back and review that. We're going to say, okay, here's where we've gone, here's how we're doing so far, versus here's how we said we were going to do. This creates trust when we give people an ongoing and honest assessment of how the company's doing, the state of the business at any given time. Every month, we want to dig into metrics in detail. This is that, where are we headed? What are we tracking to know when we're on and off track? I call it course correction. By the way, I believe it's one of the most fundamental and important responsibilities that we have as leaders is course correction. Knowing if we're on track, how do we stay ahead? And if we're off track, how do we get back on track? I travel quite a bit in normal circumstances, usually as many as 100 to 150 cities a year. And you've all traveled. You know that airline magazine in front of you. If we rifle to the back of it, there's a very familiar map, isn't there? That map that connects all the cities that the airline flies to. How about you remember the same characteristic that I see every time? Straight lines between every one of those cities. Let me just assure you, that's the only route I'm certain we never take. See, I'll step onto a plane in the first few minutes, the pilot's saying, hey, we're going to swing a little further north than we usually do because of traffic in the area. And then we're going to swing a little south because of some thunderstorms. And we're probably going to land from the north because it looks like we're a little backed up in the airport that we have, is our destination. See, but what's that pilot doing the whole time? Course correcting back to that original path. Course correcting back to the center line so that what? They hit their goal. And in their case, that goal is landing at the estimated time of delivery. I believe this is one of the most fundamental and most important responsibilities we have, is constantly understanding how we did in the recent past, how we're doing currently, and a good estimation of how we're doing in the future so that we can course correct immediately. Every week, I want to hold people accountable for specific actions towards deliverables on goal. Simply put, are we doing the things day by day that deliver the week? And are those weeks rolling up to equal the month, which in turn will deliver the quarter? And every day, there's a focus on daily leadership. If I follow this fundamental cadence and get down to daily leadership, I think the best leaders ask themselves two questions every morning. Number one, is there a message that my team or my organization needs to hear from me today? Is there a message that my team or the whole organization need to hear from me today? And number two, what kind of leader does my organization need from me today? More of a leader, where I set the direction, more of a manager, where I set the actions, or more of a doer, where I'm involved in making it happen? There's no right or wrong answer. In fact, I believe we each spend a percentage of our day in those three categories: leading, managing, and doing. The question is, how intentionally did you do it? If you follow this cadence, you'll find that you're delivering the message that your organization needs to hear to understand where you're headed. Now, the other tool we use around this is called the one-page business plan. And it literally, if you'll see it, the illustration here, it is literally a single sheet of paper. On this plan, everything that the organization needs to know is included. On the far left, the yellow column, well, that's mission and vision and values. This emphasizes who we are as a company, what we praise, what we punish, what's important to us, what is this culture that we've built and we maintain. Next column over, those are our strategies. No more than 5 strategies. And let me give you a little cheat sheet I use when I help companies develop strategies. I'm looking for one strategy that's around financial results. How do we get higher revenues, greater margins, better profitability, maybe even overall valuation improvement? I'm looking for one strategy around our customers. How do we improve our customer experience? How do we have customers buy more from us in the future? And how do we easily attract the customers we need and want to buy from us? One strategy I'm looking for is around people. How do we improve our employer brand, our employee experience? Fundamentally, how do we attract the people we need, develop them when we have them, and retain them as long as we can? I'm looking for one strategy around operational excellence. How do we get better at what we do? How do we deliver better results in the future than we do now? And the underlying pattern I'm looking for are processes and systems of continuous improvement, where small incremental improvements over time add up to big changes in results in the future. And the last strategy I look for is a wild card growth strategy. What's a different way that we could go to market? A different business model we might adopt? How do we know that what we're doing currently will serve us in the future? How do we create the future we need and want? I've worked with companies. I've done about 24 of these strategic plans at the end of last year and the beginning of this year. And in this case, we did things like geographic expansion strategies. We looked at industry expansion, where they were particularly strong in one industry and now they're edging out into coincident or adjunct industries. We did business model changes and sometimes market changes. Next column over, these are our tactics. That's how we know what we're going to do. If strategies are directional objectives that last over the next few years, tactics are time bound to this next 12 months. What are we going to do this year to advance that particular strategy? No more than 5 tactics per strategy. Our next column over, this column is metrics. What are we going to track on a regular and ongoing basis, weekly, monthly, quarterly, to see if in fact we're delivering the results that we need from that particular tactic? And the next column over, well, these are goals. If I do enough of that, when do I win? How do I know when we win? And then the last column on this one-page plan is an owner. We will not assign a metric unless we have one person who's assigned to watch that metric and is responsible for reporting on it on a regular basis. So you can see each one of these elements is tied together. Strategies linked to tactics, tactics linked to metrics, metrics tied to the goals with an overriding owner who's keeping track of whether we're on track or off track. Down at the bottom, we've got a place for a big audacious goal. I like every company that I work with to have something really big that they're striving to accomplish. Something that's so big that incremental improvement will not get you there. In fact, it forces the organization to say, how would we even do that? Because if I can get an organization continually asking that question, how do we even do that? How can we do that? What do we have to know, learn, or do differently in the future to accomplish that? We'll create a perpetual learning organization, and those organizations always win. Last, the bottom right, are key customer impacting positions. What are the handful of roles in your organization that have the power to create a customer for life or someone who will never do business with us again? They can create a customer for life or someone who will never do business with us again. I got this working with FedEx. FedEx is one of the best run companies in the world, in my estimation, with one of the world's greatest CEOs, Fred Smith. They found when they asked their prospective customers what the most important characteristic was when they chose a parcel or package delivery company, the answer was, do I know, like, and trust the person who picks up and delivers at my office or warehouse? See, they were reminded of what we need to remind ourselves of over and over. We have a handful of people who, just by their regular interaction, directly or indirectly with our customers, have the ability to create a customer for life or someone who will never work with us again. Who are those roles? And how are we hiring for that? Are we training and onboarding for that? And are we rewarding that? Or are we hiring people who are good at picking up boxes, counting how many they pick up and rewarding that, because those might be mutually exclusive. Once that one-page plan is created, that sets the direction for the year. Now we break it down to quarters. Look, people say I have a preoccupation with quarters. Some even call it an obsession. I'm guilty, but here's why. For years and years and years, I ran my business like most people, month to month to month to month. 12 times a year, I set goals and objectives. I would push people in my organization to accomplish them. 30 days later, we'd set new goals and objectives, and we'd do it again, and the next month again and again. The other thing as leaders we do every month, by default or by design, we decide, are we investing in the company right now? I found that those investments mostly fall into 4 categories. People, far and away number 1. 2, capital expenditures, 3, any investments in customer acquisition. And 4, technology. I was terrible at it. Why? Because I had to know how we did in the recent past, how we were doing currently, and I had to speculate how we were going to do next. It was tough. Sometimes I thought we were going to go up and we went down, or I thought we were going to go down and we went up. Sometimes I got that trajectory right, only to wait too long to be sure and miss some of the opportunity. One year I just stopped doing it. I divided the business up into quarters, 4 times a year instead of 12. We set all our goals and objectives over those 90-day horizons. And I developed one of my most famous mantras. See, my team would hear every quarter, manage the quarter, measure the month. Manage the quarter, measure the month. What was I saying? We're going to set our goals over these 90-day horizons, and then the months became what? Milestones along the way that told us, are we on track or off track? And that guided our decision about whether to invest. My team also heard a different message from that day forward. And this is the one they heard. Every quarter is a 13-week race. Every quarter is a 13-week race. We've only got 13 weeks. If we're 3 weeks into the quarter, they're going to hear me say, hey, only 10 weeks left to get it all done, to meet all our commitments. Into the first month, they're going to hear only 8 weeks left to deliver all we committed to. If there's 1 month left, they're more likely to hear me say only 4 weeks left. 3, 2. I want this feeling of the sand running through the hourglass. The clock is ticking. The fruit's going bad on the produce stand. We got to get it done now. See, I think one of our biggest responsibilities as a leader is to set and maintain a sense of urgency. Create and maintain a sense of urgency. I couldn't do it 12 times a year. It just rolls around too fast. But I could do it 4 times a year. I could do it over those longer 90-day horizons, hard stop, and then a new reset to the next quarter. This is the tool that allowed me to do it. It's called the Quarterly Priority Manager. It's deceptively simple. 3 columns, 5 rows, but I can tell you the application of this very simple tool improved the alignment and performance of my team better than anything else I did. I set my priorities along with the rest of my team. These are individual priorities, not for the organization. I want to know what every one of my team is working on. We review them in a group setting where everyone in the room shares out their priorities with the rest of the team members. This creates collaboration and cohesion like nothing I've ever seen. See, frankly, before we started sharing it out, I was really the only one who knew what everybody was working on. Because I was meeting with them on a one-on-one basis and they were sharing it with me, I made this huge assumption that because I knew, everyone knew. Guess what? They don't. But once we started sharing out in a group setting, they did. Then we go out and make it happen. At the end of the quarter, we come back to the center column and we hold ourselves accountable. Did we get it done or not? If we didn't get it done, does it roll off or does it roll over to the third column, which is the next quarter? If it rolls over, does it go up because it's more urgent or down because we've lost some energy around it, or maybe it's rolling to the end? I'm okay either way. I just want to know. Then any other gaps get filled in on that third column, and that becomes the first column of their next sheet. See, I'm using a little psychology here by including that next quarter on this sheet. Anybody else binge watch Netflix, Amazon Prime? You know, those serial shows that beg you to watch another? They follow a familiar pattern, don't they? You get the teaser. Hey, got to watch the show. It's really going to be great. Here's the things that are going to happen on it. Then you get the show, and at the end, what do you get? Hey, Jim, I know it's 1 a.m. and you really should go to sleep, but look what's going to happen next. I want the same thing here. Here's what we said we're going to do. Here's what we did. And here's how we're launching into the next quarter. Launching into the next quarter. See, I think too often we limp into the next quarter if you even notice one started. Let me hold you accountable here. A couple of days ago, it was April 1st. Brand new quarter, second quarter started. Did your team have a hyper focus on a handful of very narrowly defined and clear priorities and a new sense of urgency to make those happen? Or was it just another day? Can you see how my team always had a hard reset with fresh hyper focus on these a handful of priorities and a fresh sense of urgency around it just by going through this process? After the quarter, we're going to talk about months. Remember, it was manage the quarter, now measure the month. Well, how do we measure it? Key performance indicators. Now, look, I know you probably have things you're measuring. 20 years ago, if I was talking about key indicators, you'd be going, oh, those are cool, I got to get some. Today, we've all got them. The question is, do you have the right ones and in the right frequency? When I take on a new client, one of the first things I ask is, show me the things you're measuring so you can see if your performance is what it should be. I started to see a very familiar pattern in what they sent me. The vast majority of the metrics that they shared with me were monthly and financial. Monthly financial metrics. Nothing wrong with that. The only problem is monthly financial metrics tend to have that same look back characteristic that a P&L does. They tell me a lot about how we did, not much about how we're doing, and very little about how we think we're going to do next. So the first thing I challenge companies to do is think in terms of more frequency. So what can we be tracking daily and weekly that give us an early indication about how the month is going to turn out, instead of just getting to the end of the month and looking back and wondering how we did? If all you do is take a monthly number and divide it by the number you need weekly and then daily, that's a good start. But what I really love are derivative numbers, a daily that drives the weekly and a weekly that drives the monthly. Here's a quick example. This company gets almost 100% of their revenues from successfully winning RFPs and RFQs, request for proposal, request for quote. So probably not a huge surprise to find out that their monthly number is their conversion ratio on those RFPs. But I asked them, I said, if you're halfway through the month and you haven't converted enough to hit your goals for the month, you stay on that track, can you bump that conversion rate up? And they go, well, no, not really, Jim. The good news is we're really good at that, so we keep a very stable ratio of about 24%. But the idea that we could bump that up 10 points at will, highly, highly unlikely. I said, well, what's going to deliver the month? They said, it's all going to come down to how many RFPs we received. Can we track that weekly? Yes. So our weekly number RFPs received that week, and then also month to date. And I said, well, what drives that? And they said, touches. And I said, what is a touch? They said, see all the people out there on the phones? They're talking to people who decide whether we get included in those RFPs or not. I said, can we track it? They said, yes, it's in our CRM system. Can we get it daily? Yes. Now we track touches daily, which drive our weekly RFP count, and then we maintain our conversion ratio. And by doing this, they have an early indication about how the month is going to turn out. And in this particular case, they've also answered a key question: what drives sales? And if you can answer that question in a handful of metrics, you have a huge advantage over everyone else. Then we get across to operations. Operational metrics, I'm tracking effectiveness and efficiency. Effectiveness being, are we getting better at things? Measures of quantity, quality. Are we getting more of what we want, less of what we don't want? Measures of efficiency say, can we get those results with fewer resources? I like to look at things like total revenue to total headcount, or total revenue to total operating expenses. Both measures of how our margins might change as revenues change. Measures of efficiency. Next column over, well, that's our people. Are they engaged? Are they satisfied? Are they aligned with us? Ways that we can measure that around retention. I'll measure retentions by department or location. Sometimes even I'll pull out a particular job, those key customer impacting positions. We almost always track their retentions separately from everything else. Then we go to customers. Do they like us? Are they happy? Are they satisfied? I want to know that in terms of their level of engagement. I'll track things like, is average invoice size rising? What about order frequency? What about lines if you have a product business? Are they ordering more lines or just one thing? What's their sensitivity to price increases? How long do they stay with us? What's the lifetime value? What percentage of customers does it take to add up to 80% of our total revenue? And I've tracked that over time to see if that's improving. Then the last column over is other. Other is where we're tracking things that happen outside of the business that have a direct impact in the future of what happens with our business. Here's one of my favorites. If you saw this company, you would know they're a construction company, but what you would know when you dig a little deeper is they do hotel renovations. So what do they track? Occupancy rates. See, what they tell me is below 80% occupancy, highly unlikely a property is going to enter into a major renovation project, but the higher above 80 it goes, the more likely they are. So they track occupancy rates in every market that they're in. They track downtown versus suburban because those can be different. They have a list of the top 10 largest properties in every market, and they rank order those every month by occupancy rate. Now, just knowing that little bit of information, how much better do you think their marketing efforts are than their competitors generally out there looking for new business? Much better, much more focused, much more targeted, much better results. Finding those outside numbers. I have a business that I work with that does HVAC systems for large office buildings. We track the commercial building index. I like it when they're publicly available and readily and easy to get, and we can get some history on them. So if I have all these metrics laid out, I now have a dashboard that I can look at that give me an indication about how we're doing, how we did, and a really good indication about where we're headed from here. And this is what I use on a regular basis to create those course corrections I talked about. Now, there's another tool that I use very faithfully for many, many years. And I would tell you that I at least as judged by feedback from the people who worked with and for me, this was the most powerful tool I used. The CEO leadership letter. This was a simple letter that held us accountable for past results, celebrated some of the people who had helped us along the way, and gave an indication about where we're headed next. 4 short paragraphs, but I can tell you it didn't start out that way. I was on about my 3rd or 4th letter after committing to write these for a year, and I almost stopped. I was staring at a blank sheet of paper with nothing in my head to write. See, at that time, I thought I needed to turn out a literary masterpiece on leadership, and it was just too hard. That's when I developed the template I'm going to share with you today, and I wrote this letter in this template form for the next 10 years, every month. Here's what it looks like. First paragraph, last month. What did we say was going to happen last month? What actually happened? See, this holds us accountable. It's the number one thing I hear when I talk to employees inside of an organization. They just don't get enough feedback about what happened, how we did, and learning to be transparent about not only cheerleading the successes, but sharing some challenges so people know what they can help us with. Second paragraph is your superstar paragraph. Find someone who delivered superstar results for you and tell that story. Here's what they did, here's how they did it. That how they did it is the important part of the story. Third paragraph, this is your values paragraph. Find someone who did something consistent with one of your core values and tell that story. Here's who did it, here's what they did, here's why that was so important to us in our culture. See, I don't believe that people really believe that your values are what they are until they see them in action. And the only way we can help them see them in action is to tell the story of the people who did things consistent with those values. Look, there's not a religious text in the world that doesn't use stories and parables to illustrate these same kinds of complex principles. People remember stories. And then the fourth paragraph, well, that's next period, as a next period of time. Now, I say it that way because what it means is 8 times a year, it's going to be next month. It's going to say where we're headed over the next 30 days. But 4 times a year, I may want to set a broader quarterly theme. Talk about how we're doing or where we're headed over the next quarter. I'll still drop down and talk about the next month, but I may want to set something broader. In these 4 short paragraphs, I've held us accountable for past results. I've celebrated someone who gave us great results. I've acknowledged and appreciated someone who did something consistent with the culture we've worked so hard to build, and I've indicated where we're headed from here. Powerful way to keep your organization aligned and engaged. Comes down to people all the time, doesn't it? Second question was, how am I doing? I'm showing up every day. I'm giving you what I have. Is it enough? Am I doing the right things? Am I giving you what you want? For a long time, I was pretty bad at managing people, to be quite honest with you. In fact, I remember once saying, I'll tell you what motivation is. if you do what I want you to do, you get to keep your job. I know, I can hear the groans. It's cringeworthy today. But I got better. I learned some things along the way, but I was pretty frustrated with one of my team members. I went to my head of HR and asked to see their annual review. We graded people or assessed people on a 1 to 10 scale back then. And I looked at their review and they were a 6.5. 6.5. I said, what does that even mean? And she was so generous. She goes, they do some things well, other things not so well. Right after that, I was reading a biography of a famous CEO. He asked such a similar question, it really got my attention. He said, why do we have 8, 9s, and 10s who aren't here anymore, and 4s and 5s who are? They said, oh, we can explain that. Those 8, 9s, and 10s, they were hard to manage. They really never fit in. And I bet you all have heard this one. They weren't really team players. Okay, what about the 4s and 5s? Oh, we love them. They're great. Now, they haven't really started to perform yet, but they really fit in. He, at that point, made a statement that forever changed how I thought about people. He said, so what you're telling me is we hire people based on what we think they can do, and yet we fire them based on who they are. Once I heard that, a little light bulb went off. See, this whole fitting in thing, this is about alignment. Do they align with our values, mission, our vision? Do they fit our culture? Is what's important to us important to them, and what's important to them important to us? And across the bottom, performance. Do they deliver the results we say we want and need from them? See, once I separated the two, people began to appear in a completely different way for me. I'll walk you around quickly and share what I found in short form. There's a lot more we could talk about here, maybe another time. In the bottom left, those people who are low in alignment, low in performance, they're challenged. And quite frankly, they're challenging in just about every way. Then we've got the group that are high on alignment. Like they really get our culture and fit into it, but they haven't really started to perform yet. Let's consider them to be developing. Maybe if we can put the right resources in place, we can improve their results. Then we've got that group who are low on alignment. They're delivering great results for us though, but they don't buy into this whole culture thing. I'm going to generously call them independent, as in the fact that you're getting what you want from them is merely coincidental. They're usually getting what they want. Then we've got our high alignment, high performance. Those are our champions. And while I would love to stand here today and tell you just get all champions and your life will be fine, I think you know as well as I do, there's going to be somebody in each of these 4 boxes at any given time. The question is, what do we do with them? Now, in short form, I'll just tell you that challenge must move up or out. They've either got to become more aligned with the organization, or we've got to give them a chance to find a spot somewhere else where they can be of better alignment. Because see, training them doesn't help because they just turn into independents. Oh boy, more people that are hard to manage. That's no fun. Our developing group, this is where our time and training has to go. And if we do, they will move across towards champion. Look, they won't all make it, but I say give me a team with some champions and a few people who are working to be champions. I can win with that team. Make sure that we get that time and training in for those people, especially early on. Then we've got our bottom right, our independence. Everybody got one in mind? And we've all had them. Maybe you've got one now. My non-politically correct label for them? Terrorists. Because they hold me hostage. They hold me hostage for their good results. Just ignore all my bad behaviors and the impact that it's having on the rest of the organization, and I'll keep giving you these good results that you want. I want you to remember, oftentimes as a leader, we are judged by what we accept. And if we accept that, it makes it awfully difficult to tell everyone else in the organization how important alignment is if we're ignoring a few people just because of their results. With that group, we've got to give them the 3 things they need to do to become more aligned. And then if there's a consequence to not doing it, we've got to lay it out. With our champions, with them, we've got to give them ongoing feedback in the form of rewards, recognition, and appreciation. Rewards, recognition, and appreciation. Because see, with champions, they leave because they get a better offer somewhere else. Now, for years and years and years, whenever a champion left, I had the same formula. You probably do too. What do we do to keep them? Money, right? No, ever notice how it hardly ever works? In fact, what they would say is, no, Jim, it's not about the money. See, this is a better opportunity or a bigger challenge. Better opportunity or bigger challenge. For years, I believed it until I realized they were speaking in code. And when I translated that code, what I heard was, I didn't get the recognition from you I thought I deserved. I'm going to go find it somewhere else. Let me put some facts behind that. In 2019, one of the world's largest HR consulting companies, the O.C. Tanner Company, did a survey of people who were good performers who voluntarily left their jobs. They wanted to know why. 85% of those surveyed said, I left because I didn't get the recognition and appreciation I thought I deserved for the contribution that I made. 85%. Pay was third. It wasn't even close. Out of the 85%, almost 60% said, I didn't get one word, not one word of recognition in the last 12 months I was there. Make sure, while everyone in your organization should get recognition, make sure that your champions are getting it on a regular and ongoing basis. One of the tools we use to help people get ongoing feedback is our coaching tool. Again, a very simple tool. All we do here is take the person's name, and this is not a performance improvement tool. This is a high performance coaching tool. In fact, start with your very top performers. What we want to do is in that first column, what are the three things that if this person improved in these three areas, their results wouldn't go up just incrementally, they would go up exponentially. Then what's the plan of action for each of those three things? And then what are we going to measure and by when to see if those results have improved? Using this tool with every one of my team members, top to bottom, improved their performance across the board. This became the topic of our monthly coaching conversation. Yes, I had other meetings that I had with each one of these team members, but I had one meeting that was specifically focused on these particular actions. What's working? What's not? What support or resources do you need from me? What are you going to do next? That was the gist of my conversation. And the improvement that occurred in my team members was very dramatic. Now we get down to the last question. How can I help make things better around here? I used a very simple tool. In fact, it was a cheat sheet, something that I used as a reminder. It wasn't uncommon if you walked into my office to see a sticky note on my computer or maybe a note on my whiteboard. If you work for me, you might even show up to your office and see one on your door to remind you of this particular concept, W4C. W4C is a cheat sheet that reminds me to walk the four corners. Walk the four corners, whether that's physically or virtually. It means connect with the people inside of my organization, the ones who are really doing the work, the ones who are making it happen, and ask them, what could we be doing better? What could we be doing differently? How could we change to improve things around here? What is it you see from your place in your organization that you would think that I probably would never see from my spot that we could be doing more of, less of, or differently? Maybe even something we should stop doing altogether. One of the largest companies I studied for the book is called the Danaher Company. They require every one of their supervisors. This is a $20 billion company with 26 operating units. And they require every supervisor to ask every person working for them the same question every week. If our goal was for you to do your job better today than yesterday and better tomorrow than today, what would we have you do differently? They feed those responses up to managers who look for best practices that they can ask upper management to fund in the form of process and system improvements, continuous improvement over time. Pretty simple process, but how well does it work for them? Danaher has beat the S&P 500 20 out of 20 years in a row. That's pretty impressive. But I think one of the best operators of businesses in the world is Warren Buffett at Berkshire Hathaway. Danaher is one of only 5 companies in the world who have beat Berkshire's results 10 out of 10 years in a row. And the answer they give to how they do it. We listen to the people who are doing the work and do make improvements based on what they tell us. Continuous improvement over time. Now, it sounds like down these conversations I have is to get these ideas, and you will get ideas, and some of them are actually good ideas. But there's even more to it. There's a famous story about the former CEO at GE, Jack Welch. He was in an appliance plant right in your home state of Kentucky. They were trying to decide whether to even keep the plant open or not. And he's asking a long-term employee these same kinds of questions about how they could improve. And the guy's giving him all these ideas. I don't know if you remember Jack Welch, kind of a short, fiery guy. He's got an assistant with him. He's going, "Are you getting this stuff? This is amazing." And the guy stops him mid-sentence and says, "Mr. Welch, you know what the shame of this is? For 30 years, you paid me for my hands, and you could have had my brains for free. No one ever asked." No one ever asked. Let's just not be guilty of that. Because see, here's the signal we send, however subtle. Think about how long those people in your organization have been around who are really making it happen. Maybe it's 5 years, 10 years. Sometimes it's more than 15 years. If we don't ask, the subtle signal we're sending is, you've been around here 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, and you haven't learned enough for me to care about. Or worse, you don't know anything I don't already know. How's that for arrogant? See, when I start asking people, what do they think? How can we do better? It's valuing them for what they know. And everyone feels more valuable when they're valued for what they know, not just for what they do. I'll leave you with this one last thought. The people that work with and for us are with us more hours every week than the people they say they love the most in the world, their friends and family. Factor out sleep and it's not even close. And sometimes they're wandering around thinking, does anybody care? Does any of this matter? Does this even mean anything? When I hear big picture questions like that, I'm reminded of a book I particularly like called Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. It's about his experiences during World War II in concentration camps. And he said, when we heard people questioning the meaning of life like that, we could see it in their eyes. They'd lost hope. And once they'd lost hope, they'd be gone in a day or a week or so. I want to remind you that sometimes the best tool we have at our disposal is to instill hope in the people who work with and for us. Let them know that you care they work for you. And the work they do matters, that it means something. It means something to you, to your customers, to their fellow employees. I hope in our short time today, I've been able to share something that will make a difference for you, something that will allow you to run a better business, maybe even lead in a more stress-free fashion. It's been an honor to be with you. And Dave, thank you so much for having me. I'd be happy to field some questions from the group today.
Thank you, Jim. That was spectacular. Man, so many questions. So if you have any questions out there, just go ahead and put them in the chat. I'd be happy to ask them. But I do have one question, Jim, and this is kind of getting down into the weeds a little bit. But
yeah.
Early on, when we were talking about KPIs and trying to figure out what are those numbers that drive sales. I mean, when it's easy to give examples and it sounds, oh yeah, that's so easy. But when I think about the business, my business is like, I don't know. Is there kind of like a thought process, or where would you start to kind of chip away at that whole concept with somebody that hasn't done that before? Yeah,
it's a great question. So I always ask first, what goal or outcome would spell success for you? How much of something, how many of something, what outcome are we going for? And normally people can come up with something that will fit that bill, Dave. And then I say, okay, what drives that? What do we have to do to make that happen? And then I just walk it back. What do we have to do to make that happen? What do we have to do to make that happen? And the idea is to look for the beginning of the process. Where does it start? What do we need to get more of? How would we improve that? I have a process management tool called the fishbone diagram, created a few years back. And it tracks all the things we do and what potential customer would do, and we can look at where we can improve along the way. And that usually gets us to the metric. And then obviously what we really want out of a metric is to tell us where we can improve so that the metric improved. So I think the two go hand in hand, looking at the process, looking at the metrics along the way that drive those outcomes.
Nice. You've covered a ton of stuff, and if you read Jim's book, and I highly recommend that you do, there's kind of like seven pieces to the book. And where would you start? What's the first thing that you would do for somebody that wants to kind of jump into this?
Yeah, it can seem like a lot, but what I always say, start where you are as you can start nowhere else, right? And I think it all starts with setting direction, being really clear about what it is you want to accomplish and the direction you're going to go to get there. And that one-page business plan is somewhat the foundation for that. And then we communicate on an ongoing and regular basis. How do we send the message, annually, quarterly, monthly, even weekly to our team and to the rest of the organization about where we're headed and how we're doing so far? See, that kind of communication builds trust, because never forget, trust and communication rise and fall together. Trust and communication rise and fall together. If I want to increase the level of trust, which inevitably increases engagement, I must increase the quantity or the quality of my communication. Then it's about tracking metrics. So people do something, but are they doing what we need them to do to get the results that we say we want? And the only way to know that is effectively tracking metrics. After that, we look at people. Do we have the right people on our team, and are we coaching them to the highest levels of performance? After that, Dave, I like to look at processes and systems. How do we develop processes and systems that deliver reliable results over time instead of just depending on a few good people who know what to do? Mm-hmm. And then last is celebrate successes. Now, I'll tell you something that I'll share with the group is, if there's a secret sauce or a magic bullet, it turns out to be this last one, celebrate successes. And frankly, I always thought it was the softest of the bunch. It's the one that I struggled with early on. But what I saw over and over in the case study companies was their focus on this celebrate successes as a way to drive future results. In fact, one of the case study CEOs from the book described it this way. He says, Jim, the first 6 steps, well, that's the engine that drives our results. That's how we get done what we get done. But that 7th, celebrate successes, that's the fuel for the engine. See, if we keep fueling the engine with those successes, and we celebrate people who have delivered great results and people who are highly aligned, they'll do more of it.
Nice. Let's see here. Rhonda says, thought I'd let you know this. What a privilege to be able to listen to you, Jim. Awesome presentation. She really likes that. So Denise says, it's so hard to get out of the.
Here's what I'd like to do.
How do you recommend making that transition?
Yeah, so I'm going to describe employee mode as doing. So remember the hierarchy. Lead, I describe leading as I set the direction, other people figure out what to do to get us there. Manage, I set the direction and I tell people what to do to get us there. It's more directive. And then doing, well, I'm actually involved in the doing. And I either did it all or I handed it all off. Now, if I set myself up for that, what's the question I'm asking? Should I delegate or not? Well, that's a tough one if you're a leader to wait or to think delegation is the right thing to do. At least it was for me. So I would wait too long and then shove it all off on someone else. And it wasn't really a delegation. It was being dumped on. Once I started to treat delegation like a light switch, like a dimmer switch instead of a light switch, and deciding how much to delegate instead of whether to delegate, it became much easier. And see, I could delegate. There's 4 sets of every decision is made up of 4 elements. I can delegate that first element pretty easily, and the second element a little bit more, and third a little bit more. So I'm teaching someone to finally take on the whole thing as part of their job. Delegation is the key.
Thank you. Mary says, what direction do you give HR department to handle employees' complaints? Too often complaints are ignored, and this makes people feel unimportant.
It does, you're right. So here's a different way to look at a complaint. I believe that most people are better at telling us what they don't want than what they do want. I believe it's just like hardwired into us. We talk about what we don't want in an effort for people to understand what it is we do want. So I think the first thing is to really listen, but what you're listening for is not only what they said, it's what they mean. Like, what is it they want more of when they tell you about something they don't want? And really working that out of it so that you've got something to work on, not just something that seems like a complaint.
So after an employee just fills out the application agreeing to do the job, why is it so important to get them to buy into your vision as CEO?
Yeah, because I think, frankly, we usually get exactly what we pay for. And it's just not enough, not to be successful. See, we need people to give us incremental effort, discretionary effort that they choose to give us or not. And it's really in the answer to those three questions, like, do I understand where we're headed? Because that sets context to my work. It sets a reason for why we're doing what we're doing. Then number two, how are we going to get there? That tells me what we want to do over time. And then last, of course, is that what are we tracking, which allows people to see. Imagine if every sporting event we watch on television had no score system or a way to track progress. How often would you watch? I'm guessing probably not very often. It would become pretty boring pretty fast because it would just look like people are running around doing something with no potential or prospective outcome. Same thing in our businesses. If we're not constantly aligning people's efforts around a set of goals, objectives, and outcomes, it starts to feel meaningless. We can assign meaning to work, and people will do more. They'll give us that incremental effort.
Yeah, it's kind of developing your employees as leaders and self-manage, basically. I guess that would be the goal for that.
Yeah, I think the steps are manage yourself, manage a team, manage a department, manage an organization.
Yeah. Just to backtrack just a little bit, Manuel asked if you would just talk a little bit one more time about the 4 elements of delegation. I think this is a hot topic.
Yeah, so when we delegate, first of all, let's talk about what it is we're delegating. We're delegating a decision. We're delegating a decision, and every decision has the same 4 elements. It could be the most simple decision in the world, like where I'm going to have lunch, or it could be the decision to buy a multi-million-dollar piece of equipment. But they have the same 4 elements. The first element, what are my options? What's available to me? Number 2, I make a choice out of those options. Number 3, I execute that choice. And number 4, I debrief it. Knowing what I know now, would I do it over again? So first, options. 2, choice. 3, execute. 4, debrief. Let me give you an example of the lunch. I go, okay, where am I going to go for lunch today? What's close by? What do I have any dietary requirements that that come into play? Do I have any particular preference right now? And from those options that are available to me, I choose one. Then I execute it. I go there and I have lunch. At the end, I debrief it. Was it easy to get in and out? Did I feel like I'm going to run out of time? I get 1 point if I still do it all, but someone else shadows me to see how I do it. I get 2 points if someone else puts together the options for me. By the way, it's one of the most time-consuming parts. I did some travel on my own yesterday. Took way longer than I thought just to put together the options for my flights and hotels. I'm going to delegate that next time, I can assure you. I still make the choice from those options they put together, and I execute it and we debrief it. I get 3 points if someone else puts together the options, sources the options, then they make a choice in the form of a recommendation. Now, the big shift there is I'm only looking at what they've recommended. And if that recommendation is anywhere close to what I could live with or what I would have chosen myself, then we execute it and move forward. I get 4 points if they source it, choose it, and execute it. My only involvement there is the debrief. What I want to know is, have they learned it well enough to move to step 5, which is they do it all. Now it becomes a part of their job on a regular and ongoing basis. So what you can see in that little 5 steps process is now I'm choosing how much to delegate, not whether to delegate.
That is a fabulous way to put that. That is excellent. Thank you.
Yeah.
So if we have any other questions, better get them in. We're getting close to the end of our time here. I do have a lot of questions about how people can engage with you and access some of these tools and just really be a part of your tribe, basically.
Yeah, our website is pretty easy. It's ceotools.com, and you can apply to or send us a note to be a part of our newsletter that we send out on a regular basis, and we can keep you up to speed on new developments inside of CEO Tools. I'm happy to give you my email address, which is jim.canfield@ceotools.com. And Dave, you're welcome to enter that into the chat. And if there's a particular tool or you'd like to engage, help us or have us help you implement any of the tools we've talked about, I can do it myself, and I have a team of coaches that also work with me. And we work with dozens of companies around the U.S., helping them improve their performance and have their people become more aligned and more effective.
The stuff that you put out is really top notch, and I've been subscribed to you for quite some time. One of your biggest fans, so I was really stoked that you agreed to even come on board today with us. It's been spectacular. So I really recommend everybody reach out, get involved with the CEO Tools, buy the book and read the book. It's just fabulous. And
yeah, and hey, you don't even have to read it anymore, Dave. I've done the audio book so that you can listen to it as well.
I have that as well. I listen to it every day. So please get that. I mean, it's just full of just simple things that really make a big difference. And the first time I read the book, just to rant a little bit, just one of the tools I'd implemented right away just to try it out, and it was just such a drastic positive effect right away, and so almost effortless, if you just start doing some of these things, so yep. Check it out.
Dave, the way I look at it, it's a bit like if I was here to talk about building today, we're talking about building a healthy, stronger company. If I was here to talk about building a healthy, stronger body, what's the likelihood I would talk about exercise? How about diet? How about drinking enough water? How about getting enough sleep? Look, we know the basics of this stuff. It doesn't have to be rocket science. Let's just apply the basics on a regular and ongoing basis, and that disciplined approach will dramatically improve your results.
Thank you so much, Jim.
You'll ask where
Manuel wants to know where to purchase the book.
Yeah. Amazon for the book or Kindle version, and
so Amazon, you can get it on Amazon. Audible, if you have an Audible subscription, that's great. I drive a lot, so I listen to books all the time, so that's great. And Kindle, you got a Kindle version, so
yep,
check it out. It's really fabulous. It's a good read. It's got like a little story. It's it's like a little life lesson sort of to it. I really enjoyed it. It was a great job, Jim, on that book. Perfect.
Thank you, Dave. I appreciate it very much.
Well, I don't see any other questions, so we'll let you get back to work, Jim. I can't tell you how much I thank you for coming today and sharing with everybody. Everyone just thought this was the best thing ever. You have gotten so many kudos in the chat. They were just blown away with what you've talked about today. So hopefully you can come back and visit us again, and hope to see you soon. If you come to visit Louisville, let's hook up. And so,
yep, I'm there. I'll be in Louisville all week, the first week of May, from the 3rd to the 7th. So if there's any reason for us to get together, Dave, you or me, or if anyone else listening would like to get together and chat about their business, I'm happy to do that.
All right. Jim, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dave.
Thanks, everybody, for coming today, and we'll see you next week.
Bye-bye.
Have a good one. Bye-bye.